A homeless girl shouted at a millionaire. "Don't eat that. Your wife put poison in it." On his way home to confront his wife, the millionaire was stunned by what he witnessed. As the sun began to sink behind the towering skyline, Luna stretched out her small, grimy hand toward the hurried pedestrians rushing past her on the crowded sidewalk. Her bare feet, hardened by years of walking on scorching asphalt, no longer registered pain. Under her arm, she clutched a worn, flattened piece of cardboard, her makeshift home, while desperately trying to catch the attention of the well-dressed strangers who averted their eyes. "Please, ma'am, it's been 2 days since I last ate, just a few coins so I can buy some bread," she murmured repeatedly, her voice hoarse from endless pleading. A poised, elegant woman walked by, her arms laden with shopping bags from the most luxurious brands. She wore a flowing silk ensemble in a rich shade of blue, her expensive jewelry shimmering in the fading light. When Luna timidly reached out, her small fingers brushing against the woman's soft fur coat, the reaction was immediate. "Ugh! Don't you dare touch me, you filthy little thing," the woman snapped, recoiling as though she had been burned. "This coat costs more than you will ever see in your entire miserable life." Luna instinctively took a step back, but hunger and desperation outweighed her fear. "Please, ma'am, just a little food. I can work. I'll clean your car, sweep the floor. Anything," she pleaded, her voice trembling with emotion. "Work? You?" The woman let out a sharp, scornful laugh. "Look at yourself. You're disgusting. You reek. You probably carry lice and God knows what else." She turned sharply, her eyes sweeping over the surrounding crowd, as though searching for assistance. "Gods, someone remove this filthy child from my sight," she shrieked. Her piercing voice drew the attention of nearby passers-by. Noticing the small audience gathering, the woman seemed to revel in her cruelty. Adjusting the glittering rings on her manicured fingers, she gazed down at Luna with sheer contempt. "You people are all the same. Begging, stealing, making excuses for your pathetic existence. Why don't you go to an orphanage? Oh, that's right. You'd have to follow rules there. You'd rather be out here, polluting our city with your filth." Her voice was cold, slicing through the air like a blade. "You don't know anything about me," Luna shot back, her heart pounding. A fire flickered in her chest, a courage she never knew she possessed. "You have no idea why I'm on the streets. You don't know what I've been through." A circle of onlookers had formed. The woman, realizing she had an audience, straightened her posture, her lips curling in a sneer. Without warning, she thrust her hand forward, shoving Luna with such force that the girl stumbled backward, falling into a filthy puddle. "How dare you speak to me like that?" the woman spat venomously. "Guards, hurry! This wretched beggar just tried to rob me." Luna gasped as the cold water soaked through her tattered clothes, her only piece of cardboard now completely ruined. Tears welled in her eyes, but she forced herself to lift her head. "I never stole anything," she whispered, her voice cracking with grief. "I just wanted a little food." The crowd began to murmur, some pulling out their phones to record the escalating scene. The elegant woman, noticing that not everyone shared her disdainful attitude, shifted her approach. "Look at this, now she's going to play the victim," she sneered, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I know her kind. She's probably part of some gang. They use children like her to distract us while they rob us blind." Luna's heart pounded in her chest, her face flushed with anger. "That's a lie," she shouted, her voice breaking with emotion. "The only bad person here is you. Someone who has everything and helps no one." Tears streamed freely down her dirt-streaked face as she quickly scrambled to gather her drenched cardboard, still soaking in the filthy puddle. As Luna rose, she noticed the indifferent faces of the passing pedestrians. Some snickered at the spectacle, others pretended as though nothing was happening, not even sparing a glance. A security guard from the luxury store, his expression hard and unapproachable, began making his way toward her. "Why do they treat us like this?" Luna thought bitterly, her heart sinking. "I didn't choose to be born poor. I didn't choose to live on the streets." In a panic, she quickly picked herself up and ran, dodging the approaching guard, her legs aching as she sped down the dim, narrow alleyways, searching desperately for a safe place to spend the night. The sharp cold cut through her torn clothes, and her stomach twisted with hunger, urging her to find shelter or food. As she ran, a group of other street children called out to her from the shadows, but Luna didn't stop. "I can't join them," she muttered under her breath, her small hand clutching the few coins she'd managed to earn that day. They always end up stealing the little I've managed to get. The wind seemed to howl louder as she hurried forward, the cold biting at her exposed skin. It was then that the rich, mouth-watering aroma of hot food hit her nostrils, making her stomach growl even more ferociously. The scent led her to the back of the Sterling, a luxurious restaurant. Her legs trembled with weakness as she approached the trash bins, her steps careful and slow. "There's always good food here, I just have to be quick so the staff don't catch me," she thought, glancing around nervously to ensure no one was watching. With the practiced motion of someone who had done this countless times, Luna adjusted the ragged cap that barely covered her messy black hair. Her small, nimble hands dove into the trash, feeling her way through the discarded scraps. Her almond-shaped eyes, darkened with the shadow of sleepless nights on the streets, scanned the pile quickly. The scent of spices and grilled meat wafted from the kitchen windows above, reminding her just how empty her stomach felt. Then, her fingers brushed against something familiar. An almost intact package of bread, barely touched. If only people knew how much food gets wasted here, while so many of us go hungry, Luna muttered bitterly to herself as she tucked the precious bread into the pocket of her coat, careful not to draw attention. The sound of plates clattering and the soft hum of the kitchen staff filled the air, and Luna's gaze turned instinctively toward the kitchen window. The warm golden light spilling from inside revealed a pristine dining area and servers in spotless white uniforms, so unlike the chaos of the street. She moved even more cautiously now, her bare feet silent against the wet asphalt. Through the misted glass, she could see the frantic motion of the chefs and waiters, all busy preparing and serving meals that she could only dream of tasting. It was incredible how they resembled ants, each one so absorbed in their own task, oblivious to the world around them, Luna thought, pressing her nose gently against the cold window. The busy kitchen, filled with the clattering of plates and the hustle of the staff, suddenly fell silent as a striking figure entered. An elegant woman in a bright red dress, so vibrant against the otherwise white, sterile surroundings, caught Luna's eye immediately. Luna recognized her instantly. Aurora Vanderbilt, wife of the famous businessman Atticus Vanderbilt. She had seen her face countless times in the glossy magazines that she sometimes found discarded on the street. Aurora moved with the assured confidence of someone who belonged in this world, her high heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, commanding attention as she made her way deeper into the kitchen. What would a woman as wealthy and glamorous as her be doing in a kitchen? Luna wondered, her curiosity piqued. People like her don't mingle with the staff, do they? The busy chefs and waiters seemed oblivious to her presence, their attention entirely on their work. Aurora approached one of the counters, where an elaborate dish was being carefully plated, and Luna felt her heart race with anticipation, her eyes fixed on the scene. Then, from inside her designer handbag, Aurora produced a small, dark glass vial that caught the fluorescent light, gleaming ominously. Luna's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she knew whatever was in that vial was something dangerous. "Please, someone, please notice her. Please, someone see what's happening," Luna whispered under her breath, the fear rising in her chest like a suffocating tide. With swift precision, Aurora seized the moment as the waiter's attention shifted to a conversation with a cook. She dropped several droplets of the dark liquid onto the dish in front of her, her gloved hands steady, not a single tremor betraying the cold calculation in her movements. Luna shuddered at the sight. "My God, she's poisoning the food," Luna thought in horror, her entire body freezing with disbelief. How could anyone be so heartlessly cruel? The waiter turned back to the dish, oblivious to the silent crime unfolding before him. Aurora slipped the vial back into her bag as though nothing had happened, her smile serene and polished, her red lips curling in what appeared to be satisfaction as she admired the presentation of the dish. "I can't just stand here, I need to do something, I can't let this happen," Luna thought, her body trembling, not just from the cold but from the fear coursing through her veins, mixed with the sharp edge of adrenaline. She stepped back from the window, her legs unsteady, her frail body struggling to carry her as she bolted toward the entrance of the restaurant. Her thoughts spun wildly, scrambling to find a way to stop the tragedy that was about to unfold. "If I scream, no one will believe me. I'm just a street kid. Who would listen to my words over hers?" The bitterness of the thought struck her like a blow, but she refused to let it paralyze her. Luna's heart hammered in her chest, so loud it felt like it might burst free. As she rounded the corner of the building, her dirty hands gripped the exposed brick wall for support, her mind racing as her legs carried her forward as quickly as they could. "Please, God, help me get there in time," Luna whispered through labored breaths. "I can't just stand here. Someone's going to die if I do nothing." Her legs burned with exhaustion as she reached the entrance of the restaurant, only to be confronted by a tall, imposing security guard whose cold, unyielding gaze made her falter. The stark contrast between her tattered clothes and unkempt hair and the pristine, refined atmosphere of the establishment was impossible to ignore. "Please, sir," she pleaded, her voice shaky with panic. "I need to go inside. It's an emergency. Someone's going to die if I don't stop them." The guard's grip was firm as he seized her arm, blocking her way with unshakable authority. Luna struggled, but her strength was no match for his, and soon tears began to spill down her grimy cheeks, leaving clear, streaked paths on her skin. "Let me go," she cried, her voice breaking. "You don't understand. There's a woman inside. She's poisoning the food." Inside, Luna saw the waiter stepping out from the kitchen, the poisoned dish now carefully balanced in his hands. The sight of the platter sent a wave of dread crashing over her, and her heart sank as she realized her desperate race against time was slipping through her fingers. No, please, someone has to hear me," Luna screamed, her voice raw with desperation. "The woman, she's trying to poison Atticus Vanderbilt. He'll die if he eats that." Her frantic words echoed through the air, but the guard, unmoved, tightened his grip and dragged her away from the entrance, while more staff members gathered, drawn to the commotion. Luna kept struggling, trying desperately to make someone understand the gravity of the situation, her fear swelling inside her chest like a crushing wave. "Why doesn't he believe me?" she thought bitterly, the words echoing in her mind. "Just because I'm poor doesn't mean I'm lying." Just as the situation seemed hopeless, Aurora emerged from the restaurant, her poised and graceful form slipping effortlessly through the front doors. She had clearly heard Luna's shouts from outside, and the disdain in her eyes was unmistakable. When their gazes met for a fleeting moment, Luna saw something more, something darker, something threatening in the elegance of Aurora's cold stare. "You won't get away with this, you evil witch!" Luna screamed, as she was pulled farther away. Inside, the waiter had already vanished into the main dining room, carrying the fatal dish with him. Luna's heart shattered as she realized the weight of her failure. Her legs finally buckled, unable to carry her any longer, and she collapsed onto the cold sidewalk, breaking free from the guard's grip. Sobbing uncontrollably, the weight of helplessness pressing on her chest, Luna whispered to herself, "What do I do now? How can I save someone when no one will listen?" Her body trembled as tears blurred her vision, but through the haze, Luna saw Aurora slide into the back of her luxurious car, her lips curling into a satisfied smile, as if the world was hers to control. A chill ran down Luna's spine as she realized just how isolated she was, alone with the terrible secret she couldn't keep to herself any longer. But then, a surge of determination pierced through the fog of despair. "It won't end like this," she promised herself, her voice steady despite the weight of everything she had just witnessed. "I'll find a way to prove the truth, even if it's the last thing I do." The sudden, sharp sound of breaking plates from inside the restaurant made Luna's heart leap into her throat. She quickly lifted her head, fear gripping her chest, as she wondered if the poisoned dish had finally reached its intended victim. The agony of not knowing consumed her from within, gnawing at her with every passing second. "Please, may something have happened to stop this tragedy?" she murmured quietly, her hands clasped tightly in silent prayer, her voice barely above a whisper. Desperately, she watched the movements at the restaurant entrance, her hands trembling as she tried to think of any way at all, to get inside. The security guard who had thrown her out earlier had returned to his post, but he seemed distracted by his cell phone, his attention wandering. Luna noticed he occasionally glanced toward the restaurant's interior, where soft music played and the clink of glasses could be heard. Guests chatted animatedly, oblivious to the life or death drama unfolding just outside. "I need to find a way to get in. I can't let that man die because of that evil woman," she whispered to herself, watching the guard's every move with a mixture of fear and determination. A group of elegant patrons approached the entrance, catching the guard's attention. He hastened to open the door for them, allowing Luna a fleeting chance. This was it, her opportunity to slip past him unnoticed. Her heart thudded so violently against her ribs it felt as if it might explode. "It's now or never. Please God, help me save him," she silently prayed, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she adjusted her ragged cap, preparing to make her move. As the guard turned to attend to a new arrival in a sleek black Mercedes, Luna seized the moment. Her eyes, accustomed to the subtle art of survival in the streets, quickly spotted the safest route into the building. With the kind of swift, practiced agility only a child who had lived on the streets could develop, Luna slipped silently through the door. Her bare feet made no sound against the polished marble floor. Keeping low, she darted behind an extravagant arrangement of white orchids in the lobby, her heart pounding so loudly in her chest that she feared someone might hear it. "Where is he? I need to find him before it's too late. Please, God, help me save him," she thought, her wide eyes frantically scanning the room, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The opulence around her only made her feel smaller and more out of place. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting golden light on tapestries and priceless works of art that seemed to mock her very existence. As she moved, Luna caught a glimpse of her reflection in a gilded mirror on the wall. A dirty, tattered girl, completely foreign to this world of wealth and extravagance. The stark contrast made her stomach twist in disgust. The sounds of laughter, polite conversation, and the delicate clink of crystal glasses filled the air, mingling with the soft scrape of silver cutlery against fine porcelain. Little do they know, she thought bitterly, that a murder is about to take place right under their noses. I just hope I can make it in time. Her heart tightened with a mixture of anger and despair, knowing that she was racing against the clock to stop something terrible, and that no one, not a single soul, would believe her if she failed. The maitre d', a tall, slender man with a perfectly trimmed mustache, hurried past Luna, his hands clutching a bottle of wine that likely cost more than she would ever see in her entire life. Luna seized the opportunity, slipping into the maitre d's elongated shadow and moving silently between the tables like a fleeting, unnoticed specter. Her bare, dirt-streaked feet left small, faint impressions on the luxurious Persian red carpet, but she paid no mind to the evidence she was leaving behind. Time was slipping away, and with each passing second, the difference between life and death grew more uncertain. "I can't fail now, not after coming this far," she muttered to herself, her heart pounding in her chest as her eyes desperately scanned the room for Atticus. And then she saw him. Atticus Vanderbilt sat at the center of the room, as if positioned like the tragic lead in a play he had no control over. His imposing frame, dressed in a tailored navy new suit, stood in stark contrast to the immaculate snow-white tablecloth beneath him. Luna's breath caught in her throat as she watched him, his attention focused entirely on the dish before him. Steam curled from the plate in ominous spirals rising from the poisoned food. A smile of approval began to play across Atticus's lips as he admired the presentation. "No, please don't touch that food," Luna thought, panic surging through her veins. If only I could scream. If only I could reach him before it's too late. Her mind screamed in agony as her eyes calculated the distance she still needed to cover. Just as Atticus raised the silver fork, time seemed to stretch, slowing down as if the universe itself was stalling that critical moment. The light from the chandeliers shimmered off the polished metal, casting little rainbows of color that danced across the walls. Luna watched in horror as the fork, glowing like an evil omen, moved toward the poisoned dish. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up, driven by a primal instinct she didn't even know she had. She darted from her hiding place like a wild animal, knocking over a tray of champagne, sending glasses clattering to the floor, and pushing past stunned waiters who gasped in shock. "Don't eat that! Your wife put poison in it!" she screamed, her voice hoarse and desperate, reverberating through the once lively, now deathly silent room. But it was too late. By the time Luna reached the table, still shouting with every ounce of her strength, Atticus had already taken the first forkful and was lifting it toward his mouth. His dark brown eyes met hers, confusion and surprise flickering in his gaze, his well-groomed face painted with a mixture of disbelief and growing alarm. The fork clattered from his trembling hand, the sharp sound breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the room. "Who are you? What's going on?" Atticus stammered, his voice failing him as he looked between Luna and the half-eaten dish. His face, once full of life and color, began to lose its vitality at a terrifying pace. His skin turned ashen, and large beads of sweat popped up on his forehead, quickly trickling down his temples and staining the collar of his pristine white dress shirt. Atticus's hands, now trembling violently, knocked over a glass of red wine. The dark liquid splashed across the pristine white tablecloth, adding a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding before them. "My God, someone help, he's feeling unwell," cried an elderly lady at the next table, her voice high and panicked. Atticus tried to rise, his hands pushing heavily against the table for support, but his legs gave out beneath him, turning to jelly. His eyes rolled back in their sockets, leaving only the whites visible as his breathing became shallow and labored, a wheezing gasp escaping his chest. Driven by an overwhelming protective instinct, Luna rushed to his side, but her small frame struggled to support his much larger body. "He needs help! Please, someone do something!" she pleaded desperately, tears streaming down her face, mingling with the beads of sweat now dotting her forehead. The restaurant had descended into complete chaos. A woman screamed hysterically, her voice cracking as she witnessed Atticus thrashing in front of her. Plates shattered on the floor, adding to the cacophony of panic, and children cried while others screamed, their voices melding into a chorus of horror. "It was his wife! Aurora poisoned the food! I saw everything through the kitchen window! Please, help me save him!" Luna cried, her voice cutting through the turmoil. Atticus's body twisted violently on the floor, his limbs jerking and spasming with such force that no one dared come near him, his entire form convulsed, his body a raw, uncontrolled wave of suffering. Desperation clawed at Luna's chest as she tried to protect his head from slamming against the marble floor. "Don't die, please, don't die. I tried to warn you, I swear I tried," Luna sobbed, her voice cracking with helplessness. His face, once full of life, was turning an alarming shade of purple, a stark contrast to the white of the linen beneath him. His body twisted uncontrollably, his movements erratic and violent, a chilling spectacle that had everyone recoiling in fear. A young waiter, his hands shaking with nervous energy, ran over with a glass of water. He attempted to help, but his hands trembled so much that half the water spilled before he could even reach Atticus. "Water, we have to get him to drink water," the waiter urged, his voice breaking with panic. "No, don't give him water, he could drown," Luna shouted, her voice sharp with urgency as she pushed the glass away, her strength fueled by raw adrenaline she didn't know she had. "We need to turn him on his side. He needs to breathe," Luna shouted, her instructions clear despite the whirlwind of panic. Two other waiters cautiously tried to approach with wet napkins, but when Atticus convulsed violently again, knocking over another table in the process, they hesitated, retreating in fright. The sound of shattering plates echoed through the room, mingling with the screams and frantic exclamations of the onlookers. "Hold that criminal here until the police arrive," the maitre d' barked, his usually composed demeanor shattered. His face twisted with a mix of rage and fear, his eyes darting between the frantic scene and the kitchen. Luna stood, frozen, her hands trapped in the vice-like grip of the security guard, who had arrived just in time to block any further attempts to help. Desperation surged in her chest as she realized she could do nothing more. She could only watch, powerless, as Atticus's body continued to convulse violently on the cold marble floor. Fat tears streamed down Luna's grimy face as she watched Atticus, the man she had tried so hard to save, struggling for his life. The raw agony of the moment consumed her as she begged for someone, anyone, to listen. "Please, believe me, the guilty one will get away. Aurora planned all of this. It's her." Her voice, already hoarse from shouting, barely pierced the chaos around her. The panic, the screams, the clinking of glass. Everything was a blur except for Atticus, whose life hung in the balance. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. But even as they neared, Atticus's thrashing slowly subsided. His body lay motionless on the cold marble floor, and the sudden silence that followed was more deafening than the screams of terror that had filled the room moments before. Luna felt her own body go slack in the security guard's firm hold, the overwhelming adrenaline fading into an all-consuming fatigue. Her legs wobbled, her chest tight with exhaustion. "Why does no one ever believe a street kid?" she thought bitterly, watching the red and blue lights from the police cars flicker through the windows, casting eerie reflections across the now empty restaurant. But then, something shifted deep inside her. A sudden, inexplicable surge of strength coursed through her small body. With a swift, desperate movement, she broke free from the guard's iron grip and bolted toward Atticus, her feet barely making a sound as she ran to his side. Her years on the streets had taught her that in moments like this, acting quickly could mean the difference between life and death. "Listen to me, I know what to do. I've seen this before," she shouted, her voice surprising in its authority. An unexpected confidence from someone so young, so often dismissed by the world around her. Without hesitation, Luna's small, grimy hands moved with precision, loosening Atticus's tie and collar, her movements sharp and deliberate. She had learned these actions from watching the homeless, many of whom had suffered seizures in the cold streets. "He needs to breathe, move everything out of the way," she barked, clearing away any obstacles that might harm him as his body continued to spasm violently. A circle of customers had gathered around them, some still filming with their phones, others shouting accusations and murmurs of disbelief. The maitre d' tried to intervene, to pull Luna away again, but she remained resolute, shielding Atticus with her own frail body. "If you're not going to help, at least don't get in the way," she shouted, her voice tinged with frustration. "He's dying, and all you know how to do is film?" Her words seemed to have an effect, as some people lowered their phones, shame flickering across their faces. But Atticus's spasms worsened. His face, already tinged with purple, darkened further as his body jerked uncontrollably on the floor. Luna knew she had no time to lose. With an explosive burst of strength, she managed to roll Atticus onto his side once more, preventing him from choking on his own saliva. Her bare knees scraped painfully against the cold marble floor, but the discomfort was nothing compared to the urgency of the situation. Her focus was unshakable. Her entire being was consumed by the singular mission of saving him. "Hold on, Mr. Atticus. I won't let your wife's evil prevail," Luna whispered softly in his ear, her hands carefully cradling his head, protecting it from any harm. One of the security guards moved to pull her away again, but this time, several customers stepped forward to intervene. "Let the girl help, she seems to know what she's doing," an elderly woman shouted, her voice trembling with both fear and empathy. The guard hesitated, confusion written on his face, as he looked between Luna and the now still form of Atticus. "If he dies because you stopped me from helping, you'll all be guilty," Luna declared, her voice steady, laced with a maturity far beyond her years. The chaos around them escalated. As Luna continued to work tirelessly to help Atticus, the staff bickered among themselves, unsure whether to call an ambulance or the police. The deep-rooted prejudice against the street girl caused precious moments to slip away, each second that passed making the situation more dire. The convulsions began to subside, but Atticus's breathing remained labored and shallow. "Please, someone call an ambulance," Luna pleaded, her desperation rising. "He was poisoned. He needs medical help," Luna implored, but the people around her remained frozen, as if paralyzed by fear and indecision. "Time is slipping away. I don't have a phone to call for help," she thought, her mind racing. "I have to do something now. He needs a doctor. Right now." Left with no other choice, Luna made the only decision she could. With the steely determination that had gotten her through years of hardship, Luna began to lift Atticus, her thin legs trembling with the effort. To her surprise, Atticus's eyelids fluttered, and he began to regain partial consciousness. Who are you?" he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes unfocused, struggling to make sense of the world around him. With an unshakable resolve, Luna draped his arm over her shoulders, supporting his weight as best as she could. "I'm the person trying to save your life, sir. My name is Luna. Can you stand? We need to get you to the hospital," she said firmly, disregarding the protests of the restaurant staff. "Don't let this girl take Mr. Vanderbilt. She must be involved in all of this. Don't trust her," the maitre d' shouted, his voice distant and weak as the growing distance between him and the pair spoke louder than his accusations. Despite being disoriented and weak, Atticus managed to stand with Luna's help, his large body leaning heavily on the small girl. Every step was a battle, but Luna refused to stop. She couldn't afford to fail now. "Trust me, Mr. Atticus," she whispered, her voice steady but filled with empathy. "I know it's hard, "But I am the only person here who really wants to help you." She guided him slowly toward the exit, each step a struggle as she fought to keep him upright. The path to the door seemed endless, the tension in the air thickening with each passing second. People tried to stop them. Some employees threatened to call the police, others shouted accusations. But Luna kept her gaze fixed on the door ahead. Her determination was stronger than any barrier they could place in her way. Atticus stumbled with each step, but somehow he managed to stay conscious, his face pale and drawn. "Hospital, we need to go," he murmured, his voice weak but beginning to grasp the gravity of his situation. As they reached the restaurant's exit, the security guard positioned himself in front of the door, blocking their way with an unwavering stance. "Ah!" Luna's eyes blazed with a mix of anger and desperation as she stared him down. "If you have a shred of humanity, you'll let us pass," she implored, her voice tight with emotion. "He needs doctors, not accusations." The elderly lady who had earlier supported Luna stepped forward again. Her voice, once trembling, was now firm and resolute. "Let them go," she said, the authority in her words carrying weight. With one final attempt to stop them, the guard hesitated, but when the lady's command rang out, he stepped aside, allowing them to pass. The cold night air hit their faces as they stepped outside, the sharp contrast to the warmth of the restaurant feeling like a harsh reminder of the dangers still ahead. Luna knew the nearest hospital was only a few blocks away, but each step felt like an eternity. Atticus was still struggling, his body jerking with occasional spasms that seemed to sap the last of his strength. "Just a little further, Mr. Atticus. The hospital isn't far, and there they'll believe me when I tell them about your wife," Luna said, her voice steady, though her heart was racing. She spoke to reassure him and to keep him conscious, each word a fragile thread between hope and despair. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the occasional pedestrian who eyed them with confusion and fear, whispering under their breath at the unusual sight. A dirty street girl guiding a well-dressed man barely able to stand. Some offered help, but Luna refused, her instincts telling her that trusting anyone could jeopardize her mission. "I can't trust anyone now. I need to get him to the hospital, make sure he survives, and that everyone knows it was Aurora," she thought, her determination hardening as she pressed forward. Atticus's condition worsened with each block. His face alternated between sickly pale and deep purple, his breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. Luna could feel his irregular heartbeat beneath her hands, the pulse weak against the fabric of his expensive suit. "Hang in there." "Just a little longer, Mr. Atticus. I can already see the hospital lights," she encouraged, her voice strong even as exhaustion clawed at her. "You're strong. You'll make it." Her own muscles screamed in protest, but she forced herself to keep going, knowing that stopping wasn't an option. In the distance, the wail of sirens grew louder, likely the police responding to the restaurant's call. Luna's heart raced. She knew that if they caught up to her before Atticus was safe, they would never believe her story. "They won't believe me. My word as a street girl has no power. I'll hardly be able to prove what I saw. But this time, a street child will bring justice," she vowed to herself, her pace quickening as much as Atticus could manage. The city lights flickered on, casting long, ominous shadows along the sidewalks. Atticus's weight seemed to increase with every step, his body leaning heavily on her fragile frame. Luna could feel her strength waning, but the memory of Aurora's cruel smile pushed her forward, fueling her resolve. "Just 2 more blocks, Mr. Atticus. When we get there, you'll get help and everything will be all right. You'll be safe and all this will be over," Luna murmured, her voice soft, more for her own reassurance than for him. Atticus tried to speak, but all he could manage was a low groan of pain. His half-closed eyes remained fixed on Luna, though, as if trying to understand how this small, grimy street girl could be risking everything to save him. "Don't try to speak now. Save your strength," she urged, her voice gentle but firm. "We'll be safe soon," she promised, adjusting his arm more securely over her shoulders, steadying him as best as she could. Ahead of them, a group of drunken youths blocked the sidewalk, their raucous laughter filling the air. They sprawled across the entire path, oblivious to anyone else around them. Luna's instincts kicked in. She knew they couldn't risk passing through them. Atticus could barely stay on his feet, let alone avoid a group of stumbling drunks. "We have to take another route, Mr. Atticus. I know a shortcut, but it's down a darker street," she whispered, her eyes scanning the path ahead, knowing time was slipping away. She led him into a side alley, the narrow space dim and suffocating. The alley was partially flooded from the recent rain, and the stench of garbage was overwhelming. Luna's bare feet sank into the dirty water, but there was no time to choose another way. Every second counted. Atticus stumbled, his foot catching on a broken bottle, and Luna barely managed to keep them both upright. "Watch your step. Hold on to me. I can't let you fall now," she said firmly, her small body tensing as she used every ounce of strength to steady him. A stray dog suddenly emerged from the shadows, barking furiously, its teeth bared in a snarl. Luna froze for a moment, recognizing the dangerous situation. She had seen this before. Vicious dogs were a constant threat on the streets. With one hand, she gestured for the dog to back off, using her other hand to keep Atticus steady. "Go away, we don't have time for this," she shouted, her voice sharp and commanding, echoing off the alley walls. The dog hesitated, sensing her authority, before retreating into the shadows. As they emerged from the alley, Luna's heart sank. A construction site blocked the street she had intended to take, and the familiar sound of police sirens grew louder in the distance. Atticus groaned in pain, his legs faltering again. "I can't let you give up. I'll find another way, trust me," Luna pleaded, her voice thick with determination as she watched beads of cold sweat trickle down Atticus' pale face. The sirens grew louder, and the blue and red lights flashed, reflecting off the windows of nearby buildings. Luna knew they needed to hide, but Atticus could barely move. With no time to think, she spotted a small convenience store and made a snap decision. She pulled him inside quickly, her body bracing against his weight as she guided him through the door. "Please, just a few minutes until the police pass. We can't let them find us before we reach the hospital," she murmured, her voice low but urgent, helping him lean against the counter. The store owner's eyes widened with alarm as he looked at the strange pair. Luna, dirty and disheveled, and Atticus, pale and clearly suffering. He opened his mouth to protest, but Luna cut him off quickly, her voice pleading. "I'm sick, we just need to wait a few minutes, please." But the man, unmoved, was already reaching for the phone. "Get out of here before I call the police. I don't want any trouble in my store," he warned, his tone cold and dismissive. Luna had no choice but to force Atticus back out onto the street. It was now crowded with people leaving work, their hurried movements jostling the already fragile man at her side. Each jolt caused Atticus to groan in pain, and Luna had to struggle to keep him on his feet. A woman noticed them and stopped to help, but upon seeing Atticus's condition, she started asking too many questions. "We don't have time for explanations. He needs to get to the hospital now," Luna snapped, pulling Atticus away from the well-meaning stranger before more questions could be asked. A police car slowly rolled past them, and Luna's heart skipped a beat. She instinctively steered Atticus behind a nearby newspaper stand, hoping they wouldn't be seen, praying she wouldn't be arrested for something she hadn't done. The newspaper vendor eyed them warily, but something in Luna's determined gaze seemed to hold him back from speaking. "If they find us now, they'll arrest me. And he'll die. I can't let that happen," she thought. Her breath caught in her throat as she watched the patrol car move past. Atticus, even in his near catatonic state, was doing his best to help. He walked with difficulty, leaning on Luna as little as possible, while she supported his wavering steps. He tried to speak, likely an attempt at gratitude, but all that came out was a barely audible groan. "You don't need to thank me," Luna replied, her voice gentle but firm. "I would do this for anyone who needed help. I've learned on the streets that we should help each other, maybe because I myself need the help of kind people I meet along the way." She spoke as much to distract him as to steady herself, keeping her own nerves under control as she guided him forward. The hospital lights gleamed in the distance, a beacon of hope in the dark night. But Luna could feel Atticus's weight growing heavier with each step. His body seemed to be on the edge of collapse. As they entered the emergency room, the chaos inside was impossible to ignore. Gurneys were lined up along the hallways, people moaned in pain, and medical staff rushed by in frantic motion. "Please, let someone be able to help us. He can't wait much longer," Luna whispered to herself, feeling Atticus grow increasingly heavy, his breathing becoming more shallow with each passing second. But when they stepped into the lobby, they were met with an environment that felt stifling and tense. The emergency room was packed, and Luna's heart sank as she realized the magnitude of the situation. A tall, burly security guard noticed them immediately and started walking toward them, his eyes narrowing as he took in Luna's disheveled appearance. "This is no place for beggars. Go beg for change somewhere else," he bellowed, completely disregarding Atticus's dire condition. Luna's frustration exploded, but before she could argue, Atticus suddenly went into another violent spasm, his body jerking uncontrollably, nearly bringing them both crashing to the floor. His face had taken on an alarming purple hue, and Luna's grip on him tightened in a desperate attempt to keep him upright. "Can't you see he's dying?" Luna cried out, her voice breaking with urgency as it echoed through the chaotic lobby. "It's an emergency! He was poisoned!" The receptionist, a middle-aged woman with dark circles under her eyes, didn't even look up from her computer screen. "Take a number and wait. All the doctors are busy with a multiple emergency from a highway accident," she mumbled, her voice cold and disinterested. Luna's blood boiled, but she forced herself to remain focused. "Can't you see he's dying? This is an emergency. He was poisoned," she insisted, her desperation rising as she looked from the receptionist to the growing crowd around them. A second security guard approached, his presence heightening the tension in the already stifling atmosphere. Atticus's body began to convulse with even greater force, his heavy form slipping from Luna's frail arms. She struggled desperately to keep him upright, her legs trembling under the weight of his failing body. "He's bleeding! Oh my God, he's bleeding!" Luna's voice was high with panic as she frantically tried to wipe the blood away with her tattered sleeve, but the crimson stains kept spreading, soaking her already dirty hands. In the midst of the chaos, an older nurse emerged from one of the quarters, carrying a stack of medical records. Her experienced eyes quickly scanned the room, first lingering on Atticus, then shifting to Luna. The nurse's face shifted from calm to shock in an instant. "This virgin, this is Atticus Vanderbilt, the businessman," she exclaimed, her voice sharp with recognition, as she dropped the medical records onto the floor with a resounding thud. The nurse's eyes widened in disbelief, the papers scattered across the floor, her attention solely on the unconscious man before her. "My God, it's Atticus Vanderbilt," she cried, her voice now laced with urgency. "Call the doctor immediately." Without hesitation, the nurse ran toward Atticus to examine him, but not without casting a suspicious look at Luna. "Don't let that girl leave. She must have something to do with his condition," she ordered, her voice sharp, directing the security guards to tighten their hold on Luna. Atticus's body convulsed violently on the cold hospital floor as the nurse shouted commands. Other staff rushed in with equipment, their movements frantic and hurried. Luna tried to explain, but her voice was drowned out by the escalating commotion. "Kalen was poisoned. I tried to help him. He got a little better, but he's getting worse again," Luna cried, her words full of desperation, but they seemed to fall on deaf ears. A heart monitor was rushed in, its beeping echoing in the sterile air as the sound of Atticus's irregular heartbeats filled the room. Luna watched helplessly as the nurses worked, connecting electrodes, checking his vital signs, their attention entirely focused on Atticus. No one looked in her direction. "The heartbeats are getting weaker. Where's the doctor?" one of the nurses shouted, her hands moving quickly over Atticus's body, trying to stabilize him. Atticus's condition worsened. His skin took on a bluish hue, his breathing becoming more shallow with every passing second. The security guards continued to hold Luna back as she struggled against their grasp. "He's going to die if you don't act fast," Luna shouted, her voice full of raw fear. "The poison was dark. I saw her put it in." Her words were drowned by the cacophony of voices in the emergency room, swallowed by the chaos that surrounded them. Finally, the doctor arrived, rushing down the hallway. Upon seeing Atticus, he immediately began barking orders, his calm exterior betraying the urgency of the situation. "Emergency room 3, now! This case looks like poisoning. Call the police. We need to know what happened to him," the doctor barked, quickly assessing Atticus's condition. "The police have already been called, doctor. This girl was with him. She probably has something to do with it," one of the security guards replied, his tone accusatory. Luna's heart sank when she heard the distant wail of sirens approaching. She knew, deep down, no one would believe her story. Her word was worthless. She was just a beggar. No one would ever take the word of a street child over someone like Aurora Vanderbilt, not with all the power and wealth she held. Atticus was being rushed down the hallway, and Luna could do nothing but watch, her body frozen in helplessness. "If he dies, it's your fault for not listening to me," she shouted, her voice raw with anger and frustration, tears streaming down her dirty face as she pounded her fists against the air. The sound of the machines grew frantic, and Luna could hear the doctors' voices echoing down the hallway as they worked to stabilize Atticus. Another violent spasm shook his body on the gurney, and the doctors ran alongside him. "Blood pressure plummeting, we need immediate treatment," the doctor's voice rang out, filled with alarm. Then the doors to the emergency room opened again, and several police officers filed in. Luna's heart skipped a beat as she felt the weight of her impending doom. One of the officers immediately pointed at her. "This beggar brought a poisoned millionaire to the emergency room. She probably did something to him," the security guard said, his voice dripping with accusation. Then, turning to Luna, he sneered, "Now you won't escape, you little brat." He tightened his grip on her arm, pulling her roughly toward the center of the room. Atticus's body disappeared behind the emergency room doors, leaving Luna standing alone in the lobby, surrounded by accusing stares. The sound of frantic medical activity was drowned out by the cold jingle of handcuffs. Why does no one ever believe a street child? Luna thought bitterly, her stomach churning as the officers slowly approached her. The hospital's automatic doors opened again, and in walked 3 police officers. Their heavy boots echoed sharply across the ceramic floor, and their perfectly pressed uniforms stood in stark contrast to the chaos and panic that had consumed the hospital. The oldest officer, a man with graying hair and a stern expression, immediately zeroed in on Luna. "We received a report that a citizen was poisoned, Mr. Vanderbilt, a local businessman. They said he was brought in by a beggar." "Was it you?" the officer asked, his voice hard, his gaze unwavering. Immediately, one of the hospital security guards pointed directly at Luna, who was still staring anxiously at the emergency room doors, her mind consumed with worry for Atticus. The officers closed in on her like predators, their steps deliberate, each one narrowing the circle around their prey. Luna's heart began to race, but she forced herself to remain steadfast, even when the tallest officer grabbed her arm with unnecessary force. The mingling sense of sweat and fear hung in the air, mixing with the sterile antiseptic atmosphere of the hospital. "You've got a lot of explaining to do, girl." "What did you do to Mr. Vanderbilt?" the older officer growled, his stale coffee breath making Luna instinctively recoil, a wave of disgust washing over her. The officers dragged Luna down the hospital corridor, ignoring her protests. Patients and staff watched with a mix of curiosity and disapproval, some shaking their heads, others looking away in quiet judgment. Luna tried to break free, but the grip on her arm tightened, a painful reminder of her helplessness. "I didn't do anything. I was trying to save his life. It was his wife, Aurora. I saw her put the poison in his food at the Sterling restaurant," Luna shouted, her voice echoing off the stark white walls, desperate for someone to believe her. They took her to a small room in the hospital, cold and impersonal. The officers shoved her into a hard plastic chair, the discomfort a bitter contrast to the weight of the situation. The older officer took a seat across from her, his piercing eyes fixed on her every movement, studying her like a specimen. "Let's start from the beginning. Why were you at the Sterling? That's no place for people like you," he said, emphasizing the last words with disdain, as if her very presence in such a place was an affront. Luna took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, her voice trembling slightly. She began recounting her story once more, the hunger that led her to search for food behind the restaurant, how she had seen Aurora through the kitchen window, and how the dark liquid had been poured onto the plate. The younger officer scribbled notes, exchanging skeptical glances with his colleagues. "So, you expect us to believe that Mrs. Aurora Vanderbilt, a woman known for her philanthropic work, tried to poison her own husband, and that only you, a beggar, witnessed it?" the commander asked, his voice dripping with disbelief, as though he found her very story laughable. The interrogation dragged on, the same questions asked over and over in different ways, trying to catch her in a lie, to find a contradiction, anything that might discredit her. Luna's resolve never wavered, though she could feel the pressure mounting with every word. Every statement she made was met with growing skepticism. "Why would you care about saving his life? What do you stand to gain from it?" the younger officer asked, his voice dripping with suspicion, as if her motives were beyond comprehension. Just then, the sound of high heels echoed down the corridor, rapid and determined. Luna felt her blood run cold, her heart sinking into her stomach. Aurora Vanderbilt entered the small room like an actress taking the stage, her eyes reddened from what appeared to be carefully manipulated tears, her face a mask of feigned innocence. "I was informed by the hospital that my husband was brought to the emergency room. What did this criminal do to him?" Aurora's voice cracked with feigned emotion, but Luna knew it was nothing but a carefully constructed act. Aurora moved around the room with the grace of a predator, her high heels clicking sharply against the floor with calculated precision. The red dress, the same one she wore at the restaurant, now seemed even more menacing, a symbol of her control, her power, and her cold cruelty in Luna's eyes. The woman approached the officers, her perfectly manicured hands trembling in a calculated display of distress. "My poor Atticus," Aurora began, her voice dripping with a false anguish that turned Luna's stomach. "I had an issue to take care of while we were eating at the restaurant, so I had to leave early, letting him finish his meal. I didn't think they would let people like this beggar get near the restaurant. They always want more than just food," she sneered, casting a venomous glare at Luna. Commander Ramirez, sensing her theatrics, offered his chair to Aurora. She sank into it with practiced elegance, her eyes, previously teary, now gleaming with a malevolence that only Luna seemed to see. The girl felt her stomach twist, a deep disgust rising within her as Aurora continued her carefully crafted performance. "I saw this girl lurking around the restaurant several times today. I had to take a call in the middle of the meal. That's when I saw her," Aurora continued, her voice rising with righteous indignation. "Atticus has always been so kind. He must have put something in his food when no one was looking to try and rob him," she declared, her tone tremulous, as though she were recounting a deeply painful memory. Luna, now shaking with indignation at the blatant lies, tried to stand, but the younger officer shoved her back into the chair with force. The bitter taste of injustice flooded her mouth as Aurora continued her fabricated tale. "She's lying," Luna cried out, her voice hoarse with desperation. "I saw her put the poison in. It was a dark liquid she took out of her purse." Aurora's hands flew to her face in an exaggerated, Oscar-worthy performance. "See how she lies?" Aurora sobbed, her voice breaking as though the truth was too painful to bear. "She's probably part of some gang. They must have planned to kidnap my Atticus." The officers exchanged meaningful glances, their skepticism evident as they absorbed Aurora's manipulation. "Please, ask the waiters at the restaurant," Luna pleaded, feeling hot tears streak down her dirty face, her voice thick with anguish. "They must have seen when she entered the kitchen." The commander gestured to the younger officer, who immediately took position behind Luna's chair, his eyes narrowing as he towered over her. The metallic sound of handcuffs being prepared made Luna's heart race in her chest, each click a devastating reminder of her powerless position. "We have a respectable witness against the word of a street urchin," the commander declared, his voice dripping with prejudice, as if her very existence was enough to discredit her. He leaned forward, his face inches from Luna's, his sharp gaze making her stomach churn. The smell of stale coffee on his breath made her want to recoil, but she forced herself to remain firm, holding the officer's gaze with as much resolve as she could muster. "How does a street urchin know Mrs. Vanderbilt's name?" the officer sneered. "How did you know that was Atticus Vanderbilt?" Luna's heart pounded in her chest as she tried to explain. She spoke quickly, about the magazines she found discarded on the streets, how she sometimes used them to stay warm, how everyone in the city knew the Vanderbilts. But the younger officer interrupted her with a mocking tone. "How convenient, isn't it?" he said, his eyes narrowing as he exchanged a loaded glance with the commander. "Knowing precisely one of the richest men in the city," the commander added, his voice dripping with disbelief. The third officer, who had remained silent until then, stepped forward holding a tablet. "Look what I found. 3 cases of theft at luxury restaurants in the last month. In all of them, a street girl was seen lurking around beforehand," he declared, showing the news articles on the screen with a smug look on his face. "Ooh!" Luna felt her chest tighten. "It wasn't me. I've never stolen anything in my life. I just look for food they throw away," she protested, her voice cracking as tears began to sting her eyes. Aurora, standing at the back of the room, brought her hands to her chest in an exaggerated gesture of disbelief. Just last week, I lost an extremely expensive bracelet at another restaurant. Who knows? She trailed off, her voice dripping with insinuation. The officers exchanged knowing glances again, sealing Luna's fate. Luna felt her breath catch in her throat. "Can't you see she's lying? Why would I save her husband if I wanted to rob them?" she cried, desperation flooding her words. The commander flipped open his notepad, his pen poised with a sense of finality. "Maybe that's the question," he said, his voice thick with suspicion. "You weren't trying to save him. You barged into the restaurant, screaming about poison, causing panic. It seems like a perfect distraction for something bigger." "Exactly," Aurora cried out, her voice high with feigned outrage. A single, perfectly timed tear rolled down her cheek, adding weight to her performance. "She must be part of some gang. Using children is so common in these cases." Luna's chest tightened as she looked from one officer to another, searching for any hint of doubt, any crack of empathy, but all she saw were hard, accusing expressions. Aurora had won. Her word, backed by wealth, power, and her polished, respectable status, had completely overshadowed Luna's truth. The officer's conviction was impenetrable. "I hope you make this criminal pay for what she did," Aurora said, her voice cold and final, walking toward the door with the elegance of someone who had just won a battle. Luna stood frozen, the weight of the injustice settling over her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. She could hear the echo of Aurora's heels, a reminder of how powerless she was in this moment. "The truth will come out, he'll get better and tell you it was you. Don't you see that while you waste time accusing me, she might try to hurt him again?" Luna tried one last time, her voice barely a whisper, thick with desperation. Aurora stood up with deliberate grace, smoothing her red dress, a faint smile playing on her lips, her composure unshaken. "I need to see my husband now," Aurora said coldly, her voice dripping with finality. "Luna," the officer barked, his hands closing tighter around her wrists. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into Luna's delicate skin, the sharp click of the lock sounding to her like the final verdict on her fate. The younger officer yanked her out of the chair, cutting her off before she could make another plea. "Please, someone has to believe me," Luna sobbed, her voice breaking as she struggled to make herself heard. "She's going to try to hurt him again." But her cries were swallowed by the noise of the bustling hospital as she was led away, shackled. The sound of the handcuffs clinking against the floor seemed to echo down the sterile hallways, a cruel reminder of her powerless state. Aurora stood by the door, her smile like ice, hidden behind a silk handkerchief she used to dab at the non-existent tears on her face. Other patients and hospital staff stopped to watch the scene unfold, murmuring under their breath. "I hope you learn to keep these people away from decent establishments," Aurora called out loudly, her voice dripping with disdain. The words were like poison, and the murmurs of approval from onlookers only made Luna feel more isolated and hopeless. The officer shoved Luna forward, his long strides easily outpacing her. Her small legs struggled to keep up as she stumbled down the hall, her wrists aching from the tight restraints. Through her blurred vision, Luna caught one last glimpse of the emergency room doors, where Atticus was fighting for his life. The sounds of the medical machines, a beeping chorus of alarm, reached her ears, muffled by the distance. "You won't be able to hurt him again. When he wakes up, he'll tell the truth," Luna screamed, her voice hoarse with emotion, her eyes burning with determination as she shouted at Aurora, who was already striding toward the emergency wing with a calculated, elegant gait. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the emergency room doors, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. The medical team was rushing back and forth, and the machines began beeping more urgently, their frantic noise filling the air. Luna's heart sank as the doctors shouted for more medication, the tension palpable. No, I need to stay. He might be getting worse. Please," Luna begged, struggling against the officer's grip, but the handcuffs only dug deeper into her skin as she fought to break free. Aurora, sensing an opportunity, seized the moment for her final performance. She sprinted down the hallway, her high heels clicking sharply against the floor, each step echoing dramatically through the corridor. "Save my husband," Aurora cried, her voice rising in pitch. "Don't let this criminal take another innocent life." Her words were laced with false anguish, her acting so perfect it drew gasps of sympathy from the onlookers. "The only criminal here is you," "Murderer! Liar!" Luna screamed, her voice cracking with fury as she was dragged away by 2 officers. The hospital doors loomed ahead, and with them, the crushing weight of reality. Luna could feel herself slipping further away from her mission. Not only had she failed to save Atticus, but now she could do nothing to protect him from Aurora's second attempt. "If he dies, the blame will be on all of you who wouldn't listen. His blood will be on your hands." Luna's words rang out, her voice full of anguish, echoing through the lobby as the officers pulled her away. The cold night air hit her face as the automatic doors slid open. The flashing lights of the police car outside cast long, flickering shadows on the walls of the hospital, the noise of the sirens slicing through the night. Luna cast one last, desperate glance over her shoulder, just in time to see Aurora disappearing through the emergency room doors. "You won't win, Aurora! The truth always comes out, no matter how long it takes," Luna shouted with every ounce of strength left in her, her voice a raw, defiant cry before the officer shoved her into the back of the police car. The sound of the car door slamming shut was like a final, resounding period at the end of her freedom. Through the fogged-up glass, Luna watched the hospital recede into the distance, the place where she had left not just Atticus, but her only chance at justice. The sirens began to wail, and the car started to move, taking her further from the hospital, from the truth. Why does the world prefer to believe beautiful lies rather than difficult truths? She thought bitterly, the weight of everything crashing down on her. Silent tears streamed down her dirty face as the realization of her helplessness settled in. Underscore 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 underscore. This question, did I say all the things I wanted to say? Meanwhile, inside the hospital's emergency room, doctors and nurses scurried around in a frenzy, their movements frantic as they worked tirelessly to save Atticus's life. The machines surrounding his bed screamed with alarming noises, flashing bright, unrelenting warnings. Something was terribly wrong, and time was running out. Atticus, still wearing his expensive suit, drenched in sweat, trembled and twitched violently, as if fighting an invisible force inside him, his body betraying him at every turn. "His blood pressure is dropping too fast," a nurse shouted, her face contorted with worry as she studied the monitors. "The usual medications aren't working at all," another nurse added, frustration creeping into her voice. The hospital's oldest and most experienced physician stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. He had seen many cases like this over the years, but the severity of this one, Atticus's body fighting a deadly poison, was something that demanded immediate and decisive action. He knew time was of the essence if he hoped to save Atticus's life. "Everyone, let's try something different," the lead doctor said, his calm but firm voice cutting through the chaos of the room. "Prepare the broad-spectrum antidote immediately." The team sprang into action, the air thick with tension as they scrambled to gather the necessary medications, equipment, and anything else that could help. The clock ticked away relentlessly, each second feeling like a lifetime. "We're losing him," shouted one of the younger doctors, his voice trembling with fear. But the lead doctor remained focused, unwavering in his resolve. With utmost care, he administered the antidote to Atticus, quickly moving on to other emergency procedures with practiced precision. "Come on, Mr. Atticus," the doctor muttered, his voice low but urgent, his eyes locked on the pale man's face. "Fight with all your might. You're a strong man. I know you can do it." The minutes dragged on, stretching into what felt like hours. The medical team worked relentlessly, eyes fixed on the monitors, praying for any sign of improvement. Gradually, the medications began to take effect. Atticus's blood pressure stabilized, his breathing grew steadier, the shrill alarms quieted, replaced by the rhythmic sound of the machines, signaling his response to the treatment. "Look, his vitals are improving," one nurse exclaimed, a relieved smile breaking through her stress. "His heart rate is stabilizing." The lead doctor allowed himself a long, deep sigh of relief. "Everyone, you did an amazing job," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. "Atticus is not out of danger yet, but we're on the right track. Let's keep monitoring him closely." Hours passed as the medical team took turns watching over Atticus, making sure to measure his blood pressure, check his heart rate, and ensure the antidote continued to do its work. The exhaustion in the room was palpable, but everyone remained diligent, their determination unwavering. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity of constant care, the doctor deemed it safe to move Atticus to a private room where he could rest and recover in peace. "There you go, Mr. Atticus," said the nurse, adjusting his pillows gently, her voice soft as she tried to make him comfortable. "Now you can rest, but don't worry, we're nearby, taking care of you." Atticus remained unconscious, his breathing soft and steady. The machines around him emitted a constant, reassuring hum, their gentle beeps a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded them. The doctors and nurses continued to monitor him, their shoulders easing as they whispered among themselves, grateful for his progress, quietly acknowledging how close they had come to losing him. As the hospital quieted down for the night, a shadow slipped into Atticus's room. A figure dressed in a long black coat stepped forward, their face obscured by the dim lighting of the room. A cold, calculating look shone in their eyes as they surveyed the unconscious man on the bed. Across town, in a small, dimly lit holding cell, Luna sat quietly, her knees drawn up to her chest, staring intently at the cold, unforgiving gray floor beneath her. The stark, sterile atmosphere of the room seemed to press in on her, making her feel even smaller and more isolated. The detective's harsh words from earlier still echoed in her mind, like a cruel and unrelenting mantra. "If Atticus dies, you'll be charged with murder." It was a premature conviction, one leveled against a girl who had only wanted to help, a punishment for trying to do the right thing, for simply caring. Her throat tightened as she swallowed hard, desperately trying to hold back the tears that threatened to escape. The weight of helplessness and hopelessness pressed down on her chest, suffocating her with its overwhelming force. "They've already decided I'm guilty, even without any proof," she thought bitterly, her heart aching with the sting of loneliness and despair. The injustice of it all, the sense of abandonment, was unbearable. Suddenly, the sound of the detective's fingers tapping rhythmically against the metal table broke the thick silence. His cold, calculating eyes fixed on her, his gaze filled with the weariness and disdain of someone who had long since made up his mind about her fate. "Your story doesn't make sense, you know that, right?" he asked, his voice laced with skepticism. "A street girl with no proof, accusing a woman like Aurora Vanderbilt of poisoning her own husband? Does that sound believable to you?" Luna met his gaze, her eyes red and swollen from holding back tears. She knew who she was up against. Aurora was powerful, influential, and held the world in her grasp. Money, status, and connections, she had it all. But that didn't change the truth, no matter how much Aurora tried to bury it. "I saw what I saw. I'm not lying," Luna replied, her voice soft but unwavering, a quiet defiance in every word. The detective scoffed, standing up abruptly from his chair. He began to pace the room, his movements sharp, almost mocking. "You think anyone will believe you, girl?" he spat. "Aurora has lawyers, power, influence. And you've got nothing, just your word against hers." Luna clenched her fists, the raw emotion welling up inside her, a fierce battle between the truth she knew and the crushing weight of helplessness. She had nothing, but she had the truth, and deep down, she knew that one day, somehow, it would come to light. "I have nothing," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "but I have the truth, and no matter how hard she tries to hide it, the truth always comes out in the end." The detective stopped pacing, his exasperation evident. He shook his head, a dry laugh escaping his lips. "You really think a street girl like you can beat someone like Aurora Vanderbilt?" he mocked. "This world isn't a fairy tale, girl. In the real world, power wins." Despite the venom in his words, despite the hopelessness of her situation, Luna's resolve remained unshaken. She would never give up. If she gave up now, Aurora would win, and Atticus would die without the truth ever being known. "I tried," Luna whispered, lifting her chained wrists, her voice strained but resolute. "If he dies, it won't be my fault." She raised her shackled wrists higher, pointing them at the detective. "It will be because you didn't want to listen. You chose to believe the lies of a rich woman." The detective rolled his eyes, clearly uninterested, and gestured for the officers outside to return her to her cell. "We'll see, girl. Without proof, you stay here." As Luna was led back to her cold, lifeless cell, the weight of despair pressed down on her, each step feeling heavier than the last. The walls seemed to close in, the hopelessness suffocating her. But even with the odds stacked against her, she refused to give in. Atticus's life depended on the truth coming out, and no matter how bleak the road ahead seemed, she would fight for it. Alone in her cell, with only the faintest sliver of morning light filtering through the small high window, Luna waited. She could do nothing but hold on to the hope that Atticus would wake up, remember the truth, and help her prove it. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silent waiting, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Luna looked up, her heart racing as the door swung open. The same detective entered, his face unreadable, his expression colder than before. "Atticus Vanderbilt woke up," he said, his voice low and grave. A flicker of hope ignited within Luna, as if her entire world shifted. "Look, he survived." Her voice was barely above a whisper, fragile and uncertain. The detective gave a slight nod. "Yes, but he hasn't said anything yet. He's weak and his condition is still critical, but he's alive." A rush of relief washed over Luna, flooding her chest with warmth. Atticus was alive. Against all odds, he had made it through. "We'll see what he has to say," the detective added, his tone grim. "Until then, you're still locked up here. Don't think this changes anything. Not until we know the truth." Luna nodded, her heart hammering in her chest, but the words she whispered were full of quiet, desperate determination. "He'll tell the truth. He has to." With a final glance, the detective turned and walked away, and the heavy clang of the cell door closing echoed in the emptiness. But this time Luna felt something stir deep within her, a glimmer of hope. Atticus was alive, and as long as he lived there was a chance, just a chance, that someone would believe her. The days passed slowly, each one blending seamlessly into the next, an endless stretch of uncertainty. Yet with every moment, Luna clung to that fragile hope. Then, one morning, Atticus began to stir, as if slowly emerging from a dense, foggy dream. The hospital room around him was silent, except for the steady hum of machines, their rhythmic sound a stark reminder of the life-threatening situation he had survived. His body felt heavy, every muscle aching, as though he had been carrying some invisible burden for far too long. Blinking in an attempt to adjust to the light filtering through the window, Atticus tried to make sense of his surroundings. His memories were blurred, fragmented, piecing together like a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces. He remembered the restaurant, the food, then the searing pain, and then Luna. Her image flashed across his mind. A memory of the girl he'd seen earlier, the one who had tried to warn him. "I'm alive," he whispered to himself, his voice hoarse, weak. The door creaked open and 2 doctors entered, accompanied by a nurse. They appeared cautious, professional, but Atticus could sense an underlying hesitation in their expressions. "Mr. Vanderbilt," one of the doctors began gently, his tone soft but serious. "You were in critical condition. You were poisoned, but we managed to stabilize you in time. Your recovery will be a long process, but you're out of immediate danger now." "Poison?" Atticus repeated, his mind still reeling with confusion. "How? Who?" He attempted to sit up, but a wave of dizziness swept over him, forcing him back onto the bed. "Don't overexert yourself," the doctor advised, adjusting the various medical devices by Atticus' side. "The poison caused severe damage, but fortunately, your body responded well to the treatment." As Atticus tried to absorb the gravity of the situation, fragmented memories began to resurface. He recalled the overwhelming pain, the sense of panic, and Luna, the girl who had tried so desperately to help him, and the girl who had tried to save him. Atticus murmured the words, his voice faint and barely audible. "There was a girl. She tried to help me. Where is she?" The doctors exchanged uneasy glances before responding, their words measured and cautious. "There's no record of any girl visiting you, Mr. Vanderbilt. The only visitor listed is your wife." "No. There was a girl," Atticus insisted, his voice growing stronger with urgency. "She shouted something. She knew something was wrong. The doctors exchanged concerned looks, attempting to reassure him, attributing his confusion to the lingering effects of fatigue and medication. But Atticus was adamant, his mind sharp despite the fog surrounding it. He struggled to make sense of it all, feeling as though he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, a link that could connect the events and explain what had happened to him. "Find her," he pleaded, his voice trembling with a mix of desperation and determination. She tried to save me." After the doctors left, Atticus lay in silence, the weight of frustration simmering beneath his calm exterior. The room felt unbearably still, but his mind was a storm of thoughts, trying to piece together the fragments of memory. He knew the girl was real. He could still hear her voice, still see her terrified expression, her eyes wide with panic as she warned him about the poison. She had risked everything to try to save him, and he owed her more than he could ever repay. The nights that followed were restless, each one more haunting than the last. Every time he closed his eyes, his mind replayed the events of the evening in fragmented, jagged pieces, an endless cycle of disjointed images. He could still taste the bitterness of the poison, still feel the paralyzing chill of terror creeping into his veins, but above all, the image of the girl. The girl who had tried to save him was the clearest of all, her face etched in his memory, determined and resolute. The morning of his discharge. Atticus had convinced the doctors that he was well enough to leave. His body was still weak, a shell of its former self, but his mind had already made its decision. He had to find the girl who had saved him against all odds. As he stepped outside the hospital, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him, a tangible burden. Luna was out there somewhere, possibly in trouble, and it was his fault for not knowing who she was or where she had gone. He owed her everything, more than he could ever repay. With a pounding heart, Atticus climbed into his car, his mind fixed on the one thing that mattered now. He knew exactly where to go. The Sterling. Traffic moved at an agonizingly slow pace, each moment stretching out as if mocking his impatience. Every second felt like an hour as Atticus made his way back to the restaurant, clinging to the fragile hope that his instincts were right, that the girl who had saved him, the girl he'd only glimpsed in his haze of poison and pain, was still out there. Finally he arrived, parking hastily before heading toward the back alley, his heart racing. The restaurant was just beginning to open, and the familiar scent of food wafted out from the kitchen, tantalizing him as he drew closer. His pulse quickened, the weight of anticipation and fear mingling in his chest. He was approaching the last place he'd seen her, where Luna had risked everything for him. And then he heard it. A voice. Faint, but unmistakable. A voice pleading. "Please, just a bit of food. I'm so hungry." His heart skipped a beat. He turned the corner, nearly breathless, and there she was. Digging through the trash, her small frame nearly disappearing among the bins. She looked thinner, wearier, her face etched with the hardships of the streets. But it was her. Unmistakably. "Luna," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up at the sound of his voice, her eyes widening in disbelief. For a moment she froze, looking as if she might flee. But then, recognition dawned on her and she stopped, her body tense with a mix of relief and fear. "Mr. Atticus, you're alive," she whispered, her voice trembling, as though she couldn't quite believe it herself. "Yes," he replied gently, stepping closer, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thanks to you. You saved my life, Luna." The words seemed to break through her, and for a brief moment a flicker of relief crossed her face, before it was quickly replaced by a shadow of fear. "But they arrested me," she said, her voice breaking. "They said I tried to hurt you. I didn't. I only wanted to help." "I know," Atticus said softly, his hand reaching out toward her. "I remember everything, and I'm here to make things right." Luna stared at him, her expression still filled with uncertainty, but a spark of hope began to replace the fear in her eyes. Atticus knew then that he had found her, not just in the physical sense, but in spirit. Here was a girl who had risked everything for him, despite the danger and the odds. "I won't let them hurt you, Luna," he promised, his voice steady with quiet determination. "You're coming with me. You're safe now." And as they left the alley together, a new journey began for both of them, one of healing, of redemption, and a chance at a life neither of them could have ever imagined. Days passed. True to his promise, Atticus began to fulfill his commitment to Luna. He brought her to his home, a place she had only ever dreamed of. A mansion, so far removed from the streets that had been her only world for so long. At first, Luna was hesitant, overwhelmed by the sheer size and grandeur of the estate. But Atticus, ever gentle and patient, guided her through the unfamiliar spaces, helping her find a sense of belonging she had never known before. With time, Luna settled in. Her days were no longer filled with fear and hunger, but with hope and the possibility of new opportunities. Atticus, too, found himself changed by her presence. For the first time in years, his home felt warm, filled with the laughter and joy that had been absent for so long. No longer did it echo with the tension that had defined his marriage to Aurora. He became a father figure to Luna, guiding her with love and care, nurturing the potential he knew was there, grateful every day for the second chance she had given him, to see life through new eyes, to feel warmth and connection once more. Days passed, and true to his promise, Atticus began to fulfill his commitment to Luna. He brought her into his home, a place she had once only dreamed about, a mansion far removed from the streets that had once been her only reality. At first, Luna was hesitant. The sheer size and grandeur of the estate overwhelmed her, making her feel out of place. But Atticus's gentle guidance helped her navigate this new world, and, slowly, she began to feel a sense of belonging she had never known before. With time, Luna settled in. Her days were no longer filled with fear, hunger, and uncertainty. Instead, they were filled with new opportunities, the promise of a future she had never dared to imagine. Atticus, too, found himself changed by her presence. For the first time in years, his home felt warm, filled with laughter, light, and a comfort he hadn't known since before the tension of his marriage to Aurora. He became a father figure to Luna, guiding her with patience and nurturing her potential. Grateful every day for the chance she had given him, Atticus could now see life through a different lens, a lens full of hope, healing, and second chances. As weeks turned into months, the bond between them grew stronger. Atticus arranged for Luna to receive tutoring, opening doors to education she had never dreamed of. He encouraged her to explore her interests and passions, and in doing so, he gave her the space to grow beyond the limitations of her past. For Luna, this world of books, art, and learning was as foreign as it was exhilarating. Every page she turned, every lesson she absorbed, felt like a small victory, one more step toward building the life she had once thought impossible. She threw herself into her studies with determination, fueled by a deep desire to make the most of the opportunity Atticus had given her. Her drive was unrelenting, and the progress she made astonished both herself and Atticus. One evening, after dinner, Luna hesitated outside Atticus's study, her heart racing as she debated whether to ask the question that had been gnawing at her for weeks. "Mr. Atticus," she began softly, but then paused, nerves overtaking her. Atticus looked up from his book, his expression warm and encouraging. He smiled gently. "You can call me Dad, you know," he said, his voice soothing. Luna blushed, caught off guard but nodded, feeling an unfamiliar warmth in her chest. "I wanted to ask, do you think the truth will ever come out about Mrs. Aurora?" The mention of his estranged wife caused a shift in Atticus's demeanor. His face grew serious, and the warm atmosphere of the room seemed to cool slightly, as if the very name of Aurora had the power to cast a shadow over their newfound peace. "The police are still investigating," he admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "But it's difficult. Aurora is clever, and with her connections, proving her involvement hasn't been easy." Luna looked down, her shoulders heavy with disappointment. I don't want her to hurt anyone else," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Atticus reached over gently, lifting her chin so their eyes met. His gaze was firm, filled with an unspoken promise. "I promise you, Luna, she won't. We'll make sure she doesn't hurt anyone else, and even if justice takes time, I have faith that, one way or another, the truth will come out." True to his word, Atticus kept his promise. He didn't rest, pressing the police to dig deeper into Aurora's activities. The investigation was slow at first, but gradually pieces of evidence began to surface. Hidden bank accounts, suspicious transactions, and testimonies from people who had witnessed her mistreatment of others. Piece by piece, Aurora's meticulously constructed facade began to crumble. What had once seemed like a flawless life, protected by wealth and influence, now revealed itself as a web of manipulation and deceit that had allowed her to escape accountability for far too long. Finally, the day came. The day of the trial arrived. Luna and Atticus sat side by side in the courtroom, their hands barely touching, both of them bracing for what was to come. They watched as the woman who had once held Atticus's life in her hands stood before a judge, her powerful presence now reduced to a mere shadow of her former self. For Luna, seeing Aurora stripped of her power and influence felt surreal. The woman who had once haunted her thoughts, the person who had threatened to ruin everything, was no longer the towering figure she had feared. Instead, she was just another defendant, facing the consequences of her actions. As the trial proceeded, Aurora's web of lies unraveled before everyone in the courtroom. Witnesses came forward, each testimony revealing another layer of manipulation and cruelty. The prosecution presented irrefutable evidence, details of her attempts to poison Atticus, her plan to alter his will, and her malicious attempt to frame Luna for the crime she had orchestrated. Piece by piece, the truth came to light, shining through the darkness Aurora had tried to create. The facade she had so carefully crafted fell apart as her twisted actions were laid bare for all to see. In the end, Aurora was found guilty on multiple charges, including attempted murder. The courtroom erupted in hushed murmurs as the judge pronounced the sentence. But for Luna and Atticus, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted. Justice had been served. She was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. And though her influence had once seemed unassailable, Aurora left the courtroom broken and powerless, her once charmed life now a distant memory. For Luna and Atticus, justice brought a sense of closure, a long-awaited relief. The weight of the past, which had so heavily burdened them, finally lifted, and they were free to move forward, no longer haunted by the shadow of Aurora's cruelty. Their journey, from fear, betrayal, and darkness to redemption, healing, and light, was complete. From that day forward, Atticus and Luna dedicated themselves to helping others who had suffered in silence, just as Luna once had. They turned their painful story into a mission, a beacon of hope for those who needed it most. Together, they founded a charity, a safe haven for children without families, offering a place of comfort and care for those who, like Luna, had been overlooked, neglected, and forgotten by society. And so, what had begun as a tale of survival and resilience, born out of darkness and pain, was transformed into something greater. A story of hope, family, and the unshakable power of kindness. Luna's life, once defined by hardship, now held a promise of something beautiful. With Atticus by her side, she faced the future with courage, hope, and an unshakable joy she had never thought possible. Their bond, forged through adversity, remained unbreakable, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and second chances. A reminder that even in the darkest of times, light and love could be found, and that with a little kindness, even the most broken of hearts could heal. Did you enjoy this story? If so, drop a like and leave a kind comment to encourage us. Your support means the world. And don't forget, we love you.